Leben nur besser. Der Medicom Gesundheitspodcast. Und dazu sage ich herzlich willkommen hier im Medicom Gesundheitspodcast. Und darin dreht sich heute alles um das Credo Keine Chance den Grübelviren. So lautet nämlich der Titel des Buchs der schwedischen Psychologin Hanne Brorson, unserer heutigen Gesprächspartnerin. Sie hat sich intensiv mit Wegen aus negativen Gedankenkreisen heraus beschäftigt, und eine Anleitung dazu geschrieben, warum wir eher dazu tendieren, negativ statt positiv zu denken und wie es wirklich möglich ist, sich selbst so ein bisschen umzuprogrammieren. Darüber hat meine Kollegin mit Hanne Brorson gesprochen, und zwar auf Englisch. Wir haben es bei dieser Version belassen. Ein Artikel mit dem gesamten Interview auf Deutsch gibt es aber auch zum Nachlesen im Leben nur besser Medicom Online-Magazin auf medicom.de. Und jetzt würde ich sagen, zurücklehnen und ein gutes Mindset tanken im Medicom Gesundheitspodcast.
So you are a clinical psychologist, you are a specialist in psychosis and addiction, and you came up with a really beautiful book, the German title of which is Grübelviren, Keine Chance, den Grübelviren, Tankevirus in Norwegian, and in English you would say, don't give a chance to brain bugs. Brain bugs is the English title that you chose. It is basically about thoughts and how they can create stress or how we can get into a spiral of stress. What made you write this book, Hanne?
The reason I wrote this book was I was fresh out of university as a clinical psychologist, and I started working at this small hospital just outside of Oslo, where my patients primarily suffered from psychosis. But to my great surprise, the person that was difficult understanding turned out to be me, due to all the academic terms that I had learned during all those years at university. But at the same time, I saw how my colleagues, nurses and medical doctors, how they were talking to my patients. They were talking about, blood pressure and medication and infections and importance of sleep. They were talking about physical health. And that was really tangible, really understandable for my patients. And so I started wondering if I perhaps could borrow some of those terms to make my knowledge of mental health more concrete and useful for my patients. And so I started what mostly resembles a translation, a job as a translator. I started translating all these different psychological terms and models into more physical terms. So the well-known stress vulnerability model became our psychological immune system. All these different kinds of cognitive distortions and negative thoughts became different kind of brain bugs, which we could treat using psychological vitamins, which are evidence-based psychological techniques based on cognitive and metacognitive therapy.
Yeah, it's beautiful because I really like that about the book, because it's easy to read, it's easy to understand, and exactly as you say, by talking about psychological, let's say it's not even. This is a book for everybody, not someone from necessarily suffering from a disorder. But talking about the stress situations that we create and making this parallel to the immune system, I really like it, and the virus that comes into our mind. So what happens? What happens in our mind when we create these? What are these viruses? How can you describe these brain bugs?
Yeah, so it's like you're saying, brain bugs is it's an easy way to describe the psychology that affects us all during a normal day in our life, whether or not we have a disorder. And it's about all those cuckoo and exaggerated negative thoughts that we think during a day. In the book, I describe 13 different brain bugs, but what they all have in common is that they will have you believe that an ordinary, neutral situation is actually negative, and also make you think that those situations that are negative are even more negative. So that will have you worry and stress more than necessary.
It's basically spiraling yourself into a negative situation. The trick should be that we start observing ourselves having these thoughts.
Yeah, the first step would be to get to know the different kinds of brain bugs so that you can actually detect them when they are affecting you. So if we can take some examples. Okay, let's say, is it okay I use you as an example?
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
Okay, so let's take the present situation, right? You are interviewing me. And let's say that sometime during this interview, I yawn, right?
Okay.
And if you then happen to have the mind reader bug, then you will likely think that the reason I'm yawning is because I find you and your questions boring and tedious, right? Because that's what this brain bug does. It makes you think that you know what other people think about you and that what they are thinking is negative.
The mind reader bug, Gedanken virus. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Very common one, I guess.
Definitely. And a slightly different brain bug could be, if let's say we can fast forward in your day. And let's say that this interview is now over and you are on your way back to your office. On your way there, you meet a colleague and you smile, you nod and say hi, and he does not reply. Okay, so let's say that if you have a slightly different kind of brain bug called the center of the universe bug in English. I don't know what's the term in German?
I think the Zentrum der Welt.
Okay, so it's the same. Okay, then if you have a slight infection of center of the universe bug, then you will believe that he ignored you on purpose. Because that is what this bug does. It makes you think that you are in the center of other people's attention, but not in a good way. Okay, so if I could...
it's Nabel der Weltvirus, sorry. Yeah, center of the universe, the navel of the world. Wait a minute, I like the one because something I can relate to is the catastrophe one. The worst case scenario virus, I think, is very common too. And that is something that creates a lot of stress, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. I think most of us encounter it several times during a day. And what this virus does is it always suggests the most disastrous outcome of a situation. So let's say this interview, for example, let's say it's been very active on your part, and it's been saying that, okay, you're about to interview in English. That will be disastrous. And a psychologist, what will she think about you? This will not work at all. And so it has you stress a lot. And also it commonly makes you try and prepare for every possible disastrous way the situation could develop. And, in real life, reality, it's limited by one thing happening. Okay, so maybe you mess up a question, you will handle it. But in the world of the catastrophe bug, you will have all these numerous disasters which you will have to handle. And although you can handle this one in real life, you will not be able to handle all the numerous disasters designed by the disaster bug. So that will create a lot of worry and anxiety.
Surely everybody knows that they are actively creating suffering. Maybe not as aware as you are or we are now having this conversation, but we all know that or in a conversation with a friend, and she's, for instance, worrying too much, he will say, look, don't worry that much. You see, the situation actually is not as bad as it is. We have had these conversations. But why do human beings still tend to go into the suffering? It seems to be easier to go into the suffering than going out of it.
Yeah, well, that depends on several things. But as a species, it's been evolutionary positive for us to notice the negative information more than the positive. So it's more useful for me to notice if other people are disliking me, because that would mean that perhaps I would be
threatened.
No, not necessarily threatened, but maybe I will be not welcome into the group, and that will be difficult, or actually that could be threatening for my survival.
Yeah.
So it's really important for me to notice negative social signals and, of course, also negative cues that could relate to other kinds of threats. So this kind of negative information has had great value for us. And, of course, our great ancestors, they survived because they were in tune of this kind of information. They survived because they could predict and avoid difficulties and danger. And of course, their children, they lived to have children with other children of other people who had this kind of risk assessment. And so we are sitting here as the result of a long chain, unbroken chain of anxious and risk attentive people surviving. And here we are as a result of that. So it's not so strange that we are attentive to both social risk and physical risk.
But yet you have a cure for our immune system. You have some vitamins that we can feed ourselves to fight the virus, fight the bugs.
An interesting thing is that research shows that during a normal day, those of us without a disorder, 95% of us tend to think depressive or anxious thoughts.
That's an impressive number.
Yeah, that's a lot, right? And the first time I heard that, I thought, oh, wow, I will not be out of work. But then it hit me. Not 95% of us are patients. Okay, so that tells us an important bit of information. It tells us that you can have these thoughts without having a disorder. You may not be troubled by these. So it's not whether or not you have brain bugs. It's how you respond to them, which is of importance, right?
Yeah.
And how we respond to our thoughts or to brain bugs, it all depends on whether or not we identify the thought as being believable. And this is what the first vitamin in the book, in English, I would say the first disclosure vitamin. I don't know what the translation is in German.
The translation in German is Entlarvungsvirus. So it's the vitamin E. And it's as you say, you find out what's going on.
Yeah, because it's only what we notice that we can actually do something about. And in the book, I describe how you will proceed to detect whether or not you have an active brain bug in your thought.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have disclosed that you have a not trustworthy thought, a brain bug, then I would recommend you proceed with one of the other psychological vitamins, for example, what I called vitamin D for discussion.
Yeah.
This is actually based on a very common cognitive technique. And what you do here is that you kind of debate the thought. Okay, so you have detected you have a brain bug. Let's say that it is that the brain bug was that let's revisit the example we used with the mind reader bug. Okay, so now you think that maybe I have a brain bug and it's telling me that this Norwegian psychologist is yawning because I'm boring. So that's the mind reader, that's the brain bug suggestion, because they will always suggest something and it will likely be the most negative way to understand the situation. So what you need to do in the situation is that you need to try to come up with other ways of understanding that very same situation, right? So if I did not yawn because I find you or the questions boring, then what could the reason be for me yawning? Do you have any suggestions?
Well, maybe you had bad short sleep, not enough sleep. You have been troubling, maybe.
Yeah, maybe it's something on my part. Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with you. And that would be very accurate because I have 2 small children and they keep me from having great sleep every night almost. That would be correct if I had yawned. When you think that, okay, so maybe she's tired, maybe she has small children, then that's not stressful for you. That will maybe have you thinking, I'm glad it's not me. Hope she gets some better sleep. Because it doesn't longer present information about you in a negative way.
So do you think, Hanne, that we can train ourselves to if we note, first of all, to really notice them, to be aware of the bugs? Can we do that? And also then really train ourselves, despite of our evolution, train ourselves to assume the more peaceful or positive reason for whatever reaction we observe on the other side.
Yeah, and this has been researched quite a bit, and we know for a fact that this has a lot of effect. But as you say, it's a matter of training, because psychology, unlike physical health, there's no quick fix. There's not just a simple cure. This is a matter of exercising, practicing, making mistakes, and noticing that, this time I believed more in the brain bug than I did in the other alternatives. That way you can start going from just responding to the brain bugs to reflecting upon the brain bugs. And there lies your opportunity of changing the way you relate to yourself and to others.
I really like the fact that this book, it's tangible and it's entertaining to read. Thank you very much. Yeah, well, how would you suggest if someone read your book and said, look, I can see myself, but how can they start training? Well, which would be the steps to take? Because reading it once is certainly not enough, as you say. It takes time to change a pattern, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's luckily it's a really short book. So you can easily just look up, what was that bug again? Or what vitamin could I use for this situation? But in Norway, we have actually developed both a mental health preventive program for all high school kids. And also we have courses at several clinics and hospitals for those who needs a little extra help to use the knowledge. But for most of us, becoming aware of the different kinds of brain bugs, as at least what people tell me, just starting to notice it makes it much easier to notice your thoughts as they proceed when you know about the brain bugs. And just noticing it, for many people, the most powerful bit of knowledge. And that part, a lot of them manage on their own. And if not, this is, as I said, this is based on very familiar, well-established psychological techniques, which a lot of therapists out there can, of course, help them to further their understanding and to adjust to their particular situations or way of life. But, and this is an important but, because this is a but that a lot of psychologists also tend to forget. It's of great importance for how we respond to our thoughts. This has to do with our psychological immune system. And because you will notice that if you have one bad night of sleep, you are actually a lot more likely to perceive situations as more negative than they actually are. So sleep is so important. And also here there's a lot of knowledge you can lean on, but for most part, get up in the morning at the same time. Even though you had a bad night of sleep, get up at the same time every day and keep it going until night. So take care of your sleep.
So you think it is really also you have to have routines? Yeah, routines and a lot of sleep, nutrition, I guess. Those Definitely. Are tricks.
Yeah, so sleep is of importance. Physical activity is also proven to be very important for our psychological immune system, along with a balance between resting and activity. Because, there's a lot of us who continues to be active all the time. We don't know how to rest anymore. Actually, I've been asking a lot of people recently, what do you do when you rest? And a lot of people say that they watch television or they are checking their smartphones, they are going on social media. Very new research is showing that is actually increasing our stress hormones. Not the kind that gives you trouble breathing or your heart beating fast, but cortisol, which is actually has a great impact on both physical and mental health, and also makes us more vulnerable to different brain bugs. Yeah. So that's of importance. And also, you need to realize that when you are in situations in your life that are difficult, you're going through a divorce, or there are conflicts at work, then you will be likely to perceive other situations more negative because you will be more vulnerable to brain bugs. So just knowing that right now I'm going through a rough time. So right now I am maybe not perceiving all these situations in the best possible way.
It's beautiful because with that knowledge, we also get the permission to look after ourselves, because that is something that people or certain generations are not used to, that they can allow themselves to really care of themselves. But only then we can make sure that we stay healthy, both physically and mentally. And if I've understood you correctly, mental stress will lead to physical disease, or could do. So to wrap it all up, maybe just give a summary again of the most important things that you would like to communicate to people.
Okay, I would like you guys in Germany to know that we all think nutty, cuckoo, exaggerated negative thoughts every day, and that this does not necessarily lead us to having mental disorders. It all comes down to how you respond to these thoughts, how if you manage to identify, to disclose brain bugs, and how you handle them.
Beautiful. Congratulations to be so easily digestible. It was certainly a lot of work.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much for those kind words, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Hanne. All the best.